Another OWCS LAN is in the books. The mid-season championship was every bit as good as we'd hoped for, and then some, I'd say. There were quite a few great matches throughout the event, with surprises throughout, and most importantly, it felt like the gap between East and West was arguably the smallest we've seen in the OWCS era. This 4-day event was an excellent time all around, and we've got to talk about why. This is the mid-season championship debriefing. I plan on recapping this entire event and all of the most important matches and some general things that I noticed, so let's just get right into things with the group stage first. Starting in Group A, also known as the Group of Death, it was absolute madness. Advancing from this group was Falcons, plus Virtus Pro, which kinda came out of nowhere. Two teams with significant question marks heading into Riyadh. But when everything was on the line, these two clutched it out in some impressive map 5s, both against a very tough Weibo gaming team. For myself, and I'm sure many of you as well, this didn't quite go as we'd expect. Let's talk about Falcons first. It seemed like they turned the corner after the LCQ, and they kept the fire burning with a very easy win versus AGAL. Not a team the players particularly played well against a couple of months ago, so that was a good sign right off the bat. Honestly, I think it told us more about AG than anything, but that's not important right now, because Falcons followed up that match with that insane battle against Weibo in the upper bracket to make the finals. No matter what changes come from both sides, and no matter how much time passes in between their meetings, these two always play close. Just like in China, it was Falcons having the edge. This was a seesaw battle of attrition, but Falcons stayed composed out there, and I thought it was pretty impressive. There were a couple of downs in this series for them. Both maps they lost were rather sloppy. A blown 100-meter lead on Push, and a full hold on Eichenwald as well. The Falcons from a month or two ago probably would have fallen apart from such terrible mistakes, but this match was an indicator they have definitely grown as a team. They finally felt whole. Someone and Merit looked very good finally, at least together, and Proper was an absolute monster. The clutch plays on Tracer and that ability to match Leave on Venture is living proof he's the engine that runs this team. They very much missed him when he was on break. Having him completely changed the team's fate in this tournament, in my opinion. On the other side of it, it seemed like Weibo also answered a very important question about themselves. In years past, Qadsiah and this core were never the greatest at rush comps, but this match did not feel that way in the slightest. Qadsiah, in his 8th year as a professional, has found a way to level up alongside his teammates. It's a testament to his greatness, and he deserves a lot of praise for that. And the match itself is very much worth appreciating and watching if you haven't. It was an excellent series between two heavyweights trading blows. Qadsiah and Someone, Annihilation pop-offs. Merit and Shy having those Sojourn frags. Proper versus Leave in the flex duel. Whenever you'd think that one side had the advantage, the momentum instantly shifted. And that led all the way up until the final map where we witnessed true peak. The 5K from Shy on point B when Weibo had no business winning, followed by a clutch full cap, made it seem like Weibo had this game in the bag. This core's done some magical things on map 5 payload scenarios in years past, but this time it sadly wasn't meant to be. I kid you not when I say I had to look away from my screen because I was working at the time of the match for like a minute or two, and all of a sudden I look back and Falcons completed the map. Merit and Proper were zeroed in on advancing on day one. It's not very often that you see Shy and Leave get overwhelmed the way they did on that attack. And again, this is where practice likely made a huge difference for Falcons. It felt like Weibo never got any proper fights once they lost point A. The composure was lost at that point, and in extra rounds, it was just too difficult for them to overcome. A series that left you on the edge of your seat and a great way to start day one. But strangely, this wasn't the only rivalry of the group thanks to Virtus Pro, a team that I and many others completely ruled out of this group. With how they played in the EMEA region not that long ago, an L seemed like a lock. But like Falcons, they seemed to make use of their time off and they made some notable improvements. Right off the bat, you just knew that something was different about them. They nearly beat Weibo on both days of the groups, and if it wasn't for a 1-2 on that first day, maybe they do. And ultimately, I think it served as a good way to gain confidence, to know that if they got another crack at them, they could probably beat them, and that ended up happening, because the AG matchup wasn't even a contest right from the start. They looked and played like they knew they were a million times better. Only one map in the series was even remotely close, and AG blew a lead. For AG in particular, it was pretty disappointing. The concerns came into light. Inexperience and not being able to take advantage of these vulnerable teams led to their downfall. They did not belong out there, which again is really disappointing knowing how they played in Korea not that long ago. But ultimately, they were frauds in the way of VP's comeback arc, and come back they did, winning a 5-map series in a stunning turn of events to get out of Group A. They eliminated everybody's favorite Chinese Overwatch roster. They embraced the underdog mentality, and Weibo didn't know what hit them. Virtus Pro trusted their instincts, and they made use of a meta that on paper at least favored them. But still, they'd need nothing short of perfect play to get it done. And somebody had to step up as well. And in the end, they got both of those things. They were in sync, and a couple of guys had some pretty amazing performances. Definitely gotta shout out both Shockwave and IceNam. Shockwave hit every big shot imaginable in this game, and that's what it was gonna take to beat Shy and Leave when they were locked in, and the Mad Lad did it. They probably don't win that series otherwise if he has a, average to below average game. He had to play that well to make it possible. But don't forget about IceNam either. This man had to play double duty as a tank player and their secret weapon as the Symmetra specialist on Circuit Royale. You've got to have balls of steel to break out such a make-or-break strategy at any point in an important tournament. He took an all-in responsibility for this team, playing 2 roles at once, and he made it work. You can't give enough credit to VP for not letting Weibo or any of the other high-level Eastern teams walk all over them in Group A. A highly unexpected result here, but a welcome one. As for Weibo, it was kind of sad to see their run end as early as it did, and they're starting to become a hypothetical more than anything else. They feel like the Justin Herbert of Overwatch, if you know what I mean. Even if the meta wasn't the most favorable for their playstyle, they were still very capable of making it out of groups. Their performance would suggest that much. But they came up short in the end. As they and many other Eastern teams learned, the West is not a joke, especially in a meta where they have a great understanding of what's going on. High-pressure losses are starting to become a trend with this core, and it's felt that way since the 2023 World Cup. Right there just to either choke a lead or shrink under the spotlight. I don't like to be that guy usually, but Leaf had yet another unusually quiet critical map 5. It's starting to become a trend with him, and I really hope it lights a fire under him for Stockholm. Overall, Group A was every bit as good as I could have hoped for, and even more with some of the unexpected results. Over in Group B, Crazy Raccoon and Liquid advanced without too much of an issue. They both took turns beating up on Varel and Rock, who posted no significant threat. However, the upper bracket and lower bracket matchups that would ensue after the first round proved to be a lot more entertaining. The head turner was the upper bracket finals, where the overwhelming Crazy Raccoon got pushed to a map 5 by Team Liquid, which perhaps maybe served as an indicator early on of what was to come of Crazy Raccoon's fate. Funny enough, this didn't feel like much of a match, at least at the start. The turning point of the series came towards the end of Shambali, a map that Crazy Raccoon actually won. Despite losing the map, it felt like Liquid were starting to figure things out, and we saw that translate to map 3, where they played a solid round of push, mostly keeping it under control. It was not the most orderly map in the world, and clearly that bothered Crazy Raccoon. Lip was missing some uncharacteristic shots, Liquid were running down their spawn, it was a mess. Once that switch flipped, this game felt very different. They were clearly seeing and taking more opportunities. Zera and Tree playing with no fears, and Infected had the awareness to body block Max in that crucial last fight territory. A lot of the correct choices from a team that we know can be great. They take map 3, then absolutely cruise through map 4 with a full hold on Midtown. Partially from their pop-offs and partially from Crazy Raccoon getting too cute with it. They had lip swapping on and off of Sombra, and it just never felt like they could establish a good foothold to attack from. They carelessly gave away a lead, and Liquid pounced on the opportunity. But just when you're starting to get a little nervous, when the butt cheeks are starting to clench, Crazy Raccoon woke up to narrowly hold themselves from getting embarrassed. They were not about to relive the nightmare match for a second time. Crazy Raccoon were surprisingly able to fight this map on their own terms, and that killed any chance of Liquid completing the reverse sweep. Now, in Liquid's defense, they did try some swaps and eventually did find some success in the back half of the map, but that's a common issue with this team. What did I say in the preview video not that long ago? Liquid cannot afford to have slow starts. It kills them every single time. They're a slow team to adjust, and by the time they figure it out, it's just too big of a hole to climb out from. If they could play a complete series from start to finish, take a map early even, upsets would be so much more likely. But even through the criticisms, I'd say that this series was still a net positive. Nobody thought that this would be a close game, and at the end of the day, they still advanced to the next round, so no harm, no foul. Before moving on from Group B though, I definitely wanted to note Veryl's lower bracket victory over Overwatch Esports. This match also went the distance and was pretty entertaining. The big question and why this was so interesting to begin with was Japan, and as a region, whether or not they had what it took to defeat a team with notable talent outside of Japan. Their track record up until that point was abysmal, but this time was way different. Backs against the wall, down 2-1, they were able to fend off a solid Rock team and get Japan their first real notable international win. Nico, Top Dragon, and Slay went crazy. Masterful Illari play and relentless mechanical prowess. The turning point came on Eichenwald, that map 5, where Rock at first seemed to be in a good position. They led the momentum early, they win the first fight, unlock the payload, then proceed to win like one more fight the rest of the round. For the life of them, they could not figure out how to crack Veryl's castle defense. They barely even turned the corner of the bridge, for crying out loud. That never happens. And from there, the rest is history. It was a pretty easy dub. Cool win for Japan here, like seriously. It was nice to see them get on the board with a notable win and watch some familiar faces from the Overwatch League days at the same time. Out in Group C, things got kinda weird. Qadsiah and Geekay advanced just like you'd expect, but it's the way that it happened that makes it strange. It started off standard, AQ and Geekay meeting in the upper bracket finals, and that matchup was top tier. NA versus EU's #1 seed going head-to-head with Qadsiah being victorious. This game was fascinatingly close, and for all the weird and wrong reasons, AQ actually had a 2-0 start to the series. Geekay got outplayed both last fights on Control, then had a giga brain fart on Jib. Geekay broke out their patented Lifeweaver Bap Hanzo, and it worked really well. They held for multiple minutes on point A. But once AQ were able to break through, the map became one massive ball of confusion. We're talking spaghetti all over the floor on point B. Stagger kills everywhere, no order, no swaps, and no real team fights. A great time bank was essentially thrown away, and it most likely costed them the map. So now, even though they're obviously good enough to compete, it's a 2-0 deficit. But if you know Geekay, you know they're going to be clutch when they have to. AQ would push them to their limits the next two maps, but this time Geekay would come up huge at the very end of both maps. Extra rounds last fight on Midtown, and 2-2 with no percentage to give on New Junk City. But they found a way, just as they always seem to do. But in a similar fashion to their NA brothers and Team Liquid, perhaps they dug themselves too big of a hole. Their opponents adjusted on a crucial map 5 and managed to get a pretty large lead fairly early into the map. From there, Qadsiah just had to play the long game with the position battle and hold on. Now, in the defense of Geekay, they made it really close at the end, but AQ just managed their ults a little bit better and the comeback was thwarted. A large part of why the series went how it did was the playstyle. EMEA tend to rely a lot on the Symmetra, as we know, and she proved to be very, very strong in this playoff setup, and Geekay just had difficulties answering it. Checkmate was very disruptive throughout the set, and when Geekay tried matching on her, the experience factor made a pretty notable difference. Still though, a very fun series to watch, and it probably should have been the only close one of this group. Keyword should, because for whatever reason, Geekay messed around and nearly lost to Team CC. A team you know for a fact they are better than took them the distance. There was no easy map in this series until like map 5 arguably. They were all scrappy. And what's so fascinating is this game almost played out very different. Geekay were in the driver's seat, up 1-0 with time bank advantage on Gibraltar. But they messed around and surrendered a 3-minute lead they had in extra rounds, and then C9'd at the end when they had the fight won because of a Diva Bomb. Just horrible miscommunication. If they don't leave the cart, this probably ends up being a sweep. But alas, a careless blunder gives CC life, and they managed to make it a series. Geekay could not get these guys to go away. They clutched it out as they usually seem to do in the final map, but I'd be lying if I said things didn't feel scary after CC tied things up. Pineapple and Kaneki played great. It was an inspiring performance out of CC, and it genuinely has me reconsidering where they rank internationally. They showed flashes during the Champions Clash against Western opponents, but it could never turn into any map wins. This time the execution factor was there to a much greater degree, and they were someone to take seriously. Even if they didn't make the playoffs, they still did reach a new milestone. They pushed a good team to their limit and almost qualified. They should walk away feeling proud of what they did, and it gives them something to build on for a potential run at Stockholm. And lastly is Group D. Twistesd Minds and T1 made it out as many people expected, but it's the journey to get here that made it so interesting. T1 were dominant, their spot was never in question, this venture-favored meta was a match made in heaven, but the second place battle was kinda up and down. It was a story of 2 days between Sign Esports and Twistesd Minds. TM were the favorites in the initial match, but Sign in the spirit of Nightmare embraced the underdog mentality and got a surprise dub. They absolutely fed off the boos of the hostile crowd and acted as the villains on the first day. They just wanted to be taken seriously, to show they aren't just lucky to be here. And the story of the series was how in sync the entire team was. What did I say just the other day? They needed to play perfect. Every member needed to contribute if they wanted an upset to happen, and they made it reality. Rocket and Chronic were great as usual. I did not know Rocket was like that on Venture. He was cracked, by the way. But Luke Mino as well, man. This had us questioning everything, but it was very, and I mean very short-lived in the end, because the Day 2 rematch could not have gone any different. A 3-0 blowout that had us questioning what in the hell went wrong in the first place. Court said he is not going to lose in front of his home crowd. Unlike Game 1, he could do whatever he wanted to out there. He practically had a frag in every team fight, with plenty of space to do his thing, and I'd say that Yubi looked a lot sharper as well, which is very helpful since they rely so heavily on his Symmetra. It's like Twistesd remembered this is supposed to be their meta or something. They adjusted, and Sign peaked early in this thing, leading to a very anticlimactic finish to the groups. And with that, we have our final 8, and we can talk about the playoffs. And right off the bat, things got ridiculous in the first match. Instead of this being all Asia teams dominating like we're very used to, Twistesd Minds decided it was time to pull off the upset of the tournament and maybe of the year, taking down the best team in the world, Crazy Raccoon, in a 5-map banger, eliminating them in the first round of the bracket. There's a lot of things we can say and people are gonna cope, but there's no denying that Twistesd Minds were the better team. This was the ideal TM meta. They had a significantly better understanding of how to be successful, and that's because this is something they're very well practiced on. While CR, as per usual, wanted nothing to do with the rush compositions. Their worst enemy yet again. Crazy Raccoon refused to match in the mirror, not a single time in that series. You know something's wrong when Crazy Raccoon have no confidence they can win on something. They were determined to win this series their own way, and in their defense, they almost did, but Twisted Minds could play the long game with map choice and bans, and that's what led to a win. On that map 5, they drew up Blizzworld, and Crazy Raccoon tried throwing out Wrecking Ball, and it just had no point presence. Meanwhile, Twistesd were in sync with the TPs. They had good disengagements and movement as a team, and most importantly of all, throughout the entire series, they allowed Quartz to give them a chance. He was granted enough space to make plays, and he lived for the moment as he usually seems to do. He dominated this game against some of the best players in the world, and a case can be made he is absolutely the best hit scan right now. Such a great win by Twistesd, and a great way to make this tournament so much more entertaining. And that gets me quickly into Crazy Raccoon before we do any more praise. Super disappointed, yes, but it's kind of funny because for the most part, I feel like it's maybe over-exaggerated how badly they played. Heesong and Lip made some great plays throughout the series, and they still forced a map 5 on a significantly worse comp meta-wise. They still almost won despite the least ideal setup, where they are playing their worst comp, or at least avoiding it, while the enemy is playing their best comp. But that's the problem, right? Their biggest weakness got exposed again. Being uncomfortable on these brawly setups. It seemed to be a very common story for any time Crazy Raccoon has a shortcoming. They were so sure that Twistesd were better in the mirror, they didn't even try it. And don't even get me started on Circuit. What in the hell was that? You sub in Max, you force the Zarya, and it absolutely flops. If your enemy was on D.Va, or maybe you had like a Venture to pair up with the Zarya, it would make more sense, but neither of those conditions were present. It was very hard to watch that full hold. Crazy Raccoon were lost out there. TM had a much better understanding and level of comfort, and that was what they needed to have a chance. And you already know with some of the players on this roster, you can't afford to give them a chance because they're gonna show up. It's what a lot of them have done throughout their careers. EMEA has clearly leveled up. Twistesd deserve a lot of credit for stepping up and making this upset a reality, for real. Everybody played so well, and Quartz is a superstar right now, man. Very nice moment for the home crowd. As for you, Crazy Raccoon, going anywhere short of the finals is a big letdown, and I hope you learned a lesson here. The second match of the quarterfinals was Qadsiah versus Virtus Pro. Not much to say with this one. VP were once again the inferior EU team. They went from playing a team who wants nothing to do with the metagame in Weibo to one who lives for it. AQ are masters at their craft, a significantly better Symmetra team. And VP knew that too, and it's why they oftentimes purposely avoided that rush mirror. Refusing to play Sim and subbing in Icenom to try a desperation hazard for a couple of maps was all we needed to see. VP in an interview, I believe, even mentioned that this was the one team they couldn't hang in there with that Sim mirror and scrims, so it felt kind of pointless. They lost the game before it started, and that's all there was to it. But just knowing how heavily the odds were stacked against them heading into this tournament, VP are probably pretty happy to get as far as they did. They were one of the better stories of the weekend, and they should feel proud. Now then, if one blowout wasn't enough for you, how about two? Another mean mismatch in T1 versus Liquid. T1 have been on a crazy hot streak since the start of Stage 2 up until this point, and it was apparent in the groups they were very well prepared. Whether it was ball, rush, or anything else, T1 were superior. A clear skill gap. When they started breaking out the Doomfist and they were still winning, you knew that Liquid was cooked. A tough end to the stage for the boys in blue, but still a result to celebrate, I'd say. They didn't go as far as they wanted to, but they still looked a lot better compared to Stage 1. Concluding the quarterfinals was Falcons versus Geekay, another match that unexpectedly went the distance. The Korean super team on their comeback arc ran into yet another hungry challenger from the West. It's funny to look back on, but this tournament was almost very different because of this one game. Geekay already had a reputation for being giant slayers, so they showed no hesitation in this series. This is why Geekay are one of the biggest threats to pull off the impossible. In back-to-back international tournaments, they have either defeated or pushed the eventual champ. This time there was no upset, but it's amazing to see such consistency. A good bit of this core has played together for a long time, and you can see it with their play and how much they trust each other. They really do live for the spotlight, and no moment is truly too big. Defeating Crazy Raccoon beforehand definitely gave them a boost in confidence, plus the needed experience, to the point where they actually cornered Falcons with a 2-1 lead. Falcons could not keep those boys down. They always had a response, and in large part, that's from a team effort. No weak links. Everybody ready at a moment's notice. They looked well practiced in that rush mirror and even gave Falcons a hard time with their signature Lifeweaver BAP comp on circuit. They really threw the kitchen sink at Falcons in this series, and it nearly worked. Individually speaking, there were quite a few huge momentum-shifting plays made by Lethal, Qadsiah, and most importantly, Maimon. Maimon had a Herculean task in this series. You're already the replacement of Zera, which in itself puts a lot of pressure on you knowing how he did in Stage 1. Now you come in as a slightly lesser known player who's got to play at the same level as Zera while going head to head with Proper. And under all that pressure, he delivered in the hugest way possible. Maimon made map-turning plays on several heroes, most notably his venture with some absolutely ridiculous multi-kills. The one where he pops up from underground in overtime to contest point and manages to kill 3 and save the map is one of my favorite moments of the entire tournament. Again, Geekay had a 2-1 lead, match point at their fingertips. The champs of the tournament almost lost in the first round, but in the end, Falcons were able to slap us back into reality. I don't want the likes of Merit to get lost in the convo here, because he was really good in this series, but a certain man refused to lose. Down 2-1, losing in the meter race on Qadsiah, generally not playing all that well, and in comes Proper, at around the 6-minute mark, making the executive decision to rage swap onto Tracer. In the moment he made that swap, the momentum changed. Bro went on a rampage, farming I think like 4 pulse bombs in that time and getting kills with 3 of them if I remember. He was completely dialed in. He made huge plays for Falcons all tournament, but I think this one might have been his crowning achievement, just knowing how close he was to losing and how he basically at times was single-handedly winning fights. And that was basically the series right there and then, once Proper had that takeover. The big stick on Maimon flipped the game for the rest of the series, and Blizzard World ends up kinda being a roll. Proper in the flow state, alongside Merit getting pick after pick after pick, was just too much. Geekay put up a great fight, but it's very hard to beat such a great team when their players are doing what they did in that series. It was closer than they wanted it to be, but this was a high-quality win for Falcons that showed just how clutch they were going to be in this tournament. And on the side of Geekay, it's a performance worth being proud of despite getting eliminated round 1. You got closer than anybody else did in this tournament to eliminating Falcons in the playoff bracket. And when you think about it, if you include groups, they took both finalists of this tournament to map 5 in this one tournament. It sucks to fall short like they did, but at least they proved they can do this consistently. They can compete with anybody. And I have no doubt in my mind that Geekay will be back for Stockholm and they'll be a threat once again. And that leads us right into the semifinals. Let me start with the blowout. Falcons versus T1, a much anticipated matchup, a collision course between 2 of the top teams in the game, a red-hot Falcons on a redemption arc versus the new kids on the block. T1 were considered the number 2 in Korea for almost all of Stage 2, and up until this semifinals matchup with Falcons, they hadn't dropped a map in EWC. So you'd think they'd have a chance in this thing, right? Right? Well, no. As it turns out, Falcons aren't just back, they're World Championship back. T1 might have improved and had a good stage, but this match ultimately proved there's a huge difference in experience. I was very wrong about T1 being ready to be a finalist. The pressure got to them in this matchup for sure, and the vets made sure to use that to their advantage on the side of Falcons. T1 had plenty of missed opportunities early in the series, a lot of missed shots, and careless choices that they usually wouldn't make. It also didn't help that they were completely outmatched in the mirror. They were terrified to even try it. They more so stuck to Orisa, Malga, and Ball, and unfortunately, those choices put them at a fundamental disadvantage, just like Crazy Raccoon. Falcons even made sure to throw in some anti-ball comps on Busan to really make sure T1 could not find their comfort zone early in the series. Falcons even brought Hanbin into this game after not playing him for the entirety of EWC, and he dumpstered them on Zarya, constantly at high charge, beaming down the enemy Orisa, and essentially double pocketing Proper with his bubbles alongside Fielder on the Kiriko to make it so Proper was this unstoppable force on Venture. Honestly, a pretty effective strategy, all things considered. Proper could be as aggressive as he wanted to, cause Bubble and Suzu were basically there on cooldown. But yeah, there's not much else to say about this one. T1 did get their one map, but that was it. They were outmatched in this one in every feasible way. And the series ended on such a brutal note as well, with a 100+ meter lead on push, with Donghak desperately drunk driving on Wrecking Ball when you knew it never had a chance. Honestly, a very sad way for this team to go out knowing what they did throughout this stage. Also, T1, why did you ban Freya? What was the point of that exactly? T1 completely botched this series, for sure. One can only hope that they learn from this experience and they grow from it, cause it's clear that they can be a lot more if they can put it all together. Thankfully, not all of the semifinals was awful. Qadsiah vs Twisted Minds is a candidate for Match of the Year. EMEA's top two going at it for a shot at the finals in front of the home crowd. And how do they respond knowing the stakes? How about a 6-map gigabanger? There was a lot to love about this series. It was over 2 hours of back and forth elite plays with the crowd being absolutely electric throughout. When it comes to the match itself, it was pretty clear this one was meant to go the distance. A meta that both teams specialize in. A matchup both sides are very familiar with. It was a chess match. In the end, Qadsiah would nab a hard-fought victory in this series, but man, it took absolutely everything they had. AQ had a few conditions that needed to be met if they wanted to beat Twisted Minds. One was be the better sim team. Despite Twistesd being very known for this style of play, Qadsiah throughout Stage 2 have constantly shown they may be even better. Checkmate has genuinely become a cracked sim player, and he made sure to show it in this matchup. Along with it, Qadsiah needed to have a few timely diva picks since it was something that Twistesd were obviously pretty concerned about in the series. And lastly, Labda had to play well throughout. He didn't need to be at the same exact level as Quartz, nobody's asking him to do such a thing, but he did need to make enough plays to keep that battle close, and in the end, Qadsiah managed to meet all three of these conditions. This was a great match, definitely my favorite of the event by far, with so many amazing moments throughout. We start off on Lijiang, where Twistesd break out a pocket Zarya strat, something they basically never played beforehand. They saved it for a time, they knew Diva was strong, and when it was coming, and it worked out. It was a bold way to start the series, but against a rival that knows you so well, sometimes you've got to throw them a curveball to beat them, and Twistesd managed to start off on the right foot. And from there, it really seemed like they might have an opportunity to build a lead very early. Atlas started really good for them. Quartz made his presence known in this series very early, hitting a lot of big shots. It felt like he could do whatever he wanted with no real response from the enemy hit scan. It seemed like it might get ugly pretty fast. But around the halfway mark of the map, Labda finally warmed up after being stuck on Mei in map 1. He starts matching Quartz, and all of a sudden AQ's slightly better synergy with that leads to an eventual win on that map, and a lead in the series shortly after because we really saw the synergy aspect take form to give them an overwhelming advantage on circuit. Not only did they win this map, they put on a clinic. In maybe one of the least close circuit royales in pro play I have ever seen, Qadsiah held Twistesd just under the bridge, not even past the corner where most teams usually get full held. I cannot over-exaggerate how unclose this was. AQ took every fight confidently, even when disadvantaged. They played very aggressively every single fight. and that clearly caught Twistesd Minds lacking. There were a lot of picks that led to staggers and teamfights not even happening, and honestly some great teleporter movement on top of it all. That checkmate TP to put Labda on the small ledge behind the enemy was sick. You'd think such an unclose map would signal the end of the series and Twistesd Minds being boomed beyond repair, but you'd be wrong. More twist came when they quickly evened up the series, mind you, in a blowout win of their own. Not much to talk about here aside from Quartz just absolutely killing everything, but what else is new? So that puts us suddenly in a map 5 scenario. Winner take all on Blizzard World. And Qadsiah, they played the bans perfectly. Just like the EMEA finals, they saved the Symmetra ban right for when they could potentially need it the most. They break it out to completely change the tempo of this game after seeing it be the same for the previous 4 maps. And hey, don't forget, the last time this happened, Twistesd Minds got dominated, so it seemed like a very good decision. And at first, it seemed like the win was going to happen. They played their cards right, and that would be that. Checkmate seemed pretty problematic. He was making a lot of space, he was finding good picks every fight, and that double kill melee though, absolutely disgusting. But eventually, that advantage started to fade away. They started to stall out. Quartz did more of his thing, and UB played a very solid Mei that forced AQ to cap in overtime. And Twistesd used that momentum to pretty quickly blitz through the first 2 sections on their own attack. And with how the time bank was going, it almost felt like a done deal. They would just push it into extra rounds with a lot more time, and that would be that. But then Checkmate made the executive decision to swap over to Mei as well, and for whatever reason, that really did the trick. There were unconventional flanks, overclock pop-offs from Labda, and Qadsiah in general were super aggressive just like on circuit. They weren't afraid to commit even in 4v5 scenarios, and they held super close to spawn to delay as much as humanly possible. And while Twistesd did eventually cap to send this into extra rounds and preventing AQ from getting another attack, AQ managed to diminish a large chunk of that formerly overwhelming time bank. You gotta understand that Twistesd had 4 minutes to cap, and if they don't adjust, it's gonna be impossible to defend. AQ made it manageable. They pushed it all the way down to just over a minute, which realistically meant 1 good fight. And that gave them a fighting chance to tie. And tie they did, my friends. All odds against them, they tie, winning the only real fight, and they send this thing to a map 6. But if you're Twistesd, you gotta be feeling pretty good about yourselves. Relieved even. Yeah, you didn't take the map when you had a chance, but you were able to survive the sim ban. So now in map 6, where things are a bit more standard, you should have them right where you want them, right? Well, not exactly. Good as this series was, map 6 was very anticlimactic. AQ picked New Jung City, a map they destroyed Twistesd Minds on in the EMEA Championship game in Stage 2. And lo and behold, it happened again. They saved one last strategy in the final moment to give them that edge. This was a brutal beatdown, 300% to 0 on Flashpoint. Qadsiah won every fight. It wasn't even close, and a big part of it has to do with playing the diva variation of the meta. It's something Twistesd were obviously very concerned with in this series, knowing some of the earlier strats, and in hindsight, it's pretty easy to see why they were scared now. Ziad was all over the place. He is a beast on that hero. He could not be stopped, and it completely changed the pace of play for the second consecutive map, and this time Twistesd were a little bit overwhelmed. The masterclass of Qadsiah on this map was truly stunning to watch in real time. And it was capped off by Twistesd seemingly having a chance to actually win a fight at the end, just for Ziad and Checkmate to seal the deal with a Diva 2k bomb plus a remech kill with the teleporter combo. That play by Checkmate was disgusting. Like, the timing of it is so clutch. To do that under pressure, I just can't even comprehend it with my pea-sized brain. That bomb was literal frames away from exploding, and he manages to TP it to the high ground to get line of sight to get a couple of kills. Checkmate showed why he's the best sim in the world with that one. And just like that, Twistesd Mind's run came to an end. In heartbreaking fashion, they lose in the semis right in front of the fans. All things considered, this was an unbelievable match and quite the run by Twistesd Minds. One map away from being the first ever EMEA team in a OWCS finals, and they beat freaking crazy Raccoon along the way. That is one hell of a stage. This organization always shows up when given the proper chance, and this type of performance will have everybody thinking about them come Stockholm. Every member of this team is very capable, and I believe they could get even better in the near future. Don't forget about them too fast though, because they weren't done yet. They still had a shot at the podium in a third place matchup against T1, and they made sure to cash in on that opportunity with a pretty easy looking 3-1. After how the Falcons match went, I don't think anybody was too surprised to see them get overwhelmed the way they did. A little boomed, a little inexperienced, and no real chance of beating their opponents in this type of meta. Eventually, they decided that now was the time to start playing Ram Sim against one of the best Ram Sim teams in the world. Not to mention, they abandoned the Venture for a while, which worked so well for them the map before. Highly questionable choices all around that basically boomed them out of the game when they had the lead. They literally never recovered after this map. They were trying Doomfist and all these other weird things, and it all flopped. Every map was a blowout until Icon, where they did show some life with a Desperation Hazard Genji. Shout out to them. It was pretty fun to watch, but it was kind of too late at that point. Really disappointing way for the tournament to end for T1, but let's not waste any more time talking about it because nobody cares about third place. Let's instead talk about the grand finals. Falcons versus alexyOWL, the first not fully Korean finals in OWCS history. And yes, EWC from last year does not count because it was not an OWCS affiliated tournament. Anyway, there was reason to feel hyped about this matchup. The best Ram Sim team versus the Korean God Squad. It actually kind of felt like at first AQ might have a chance for the simple reason that their teamwork might have actually been the best in their entire tournament. But unfortunately, it never went that way. This was a 4-0 beatdown. The outcome was never in doubt. It showed that while the West has made quite a few strides, that they still aren't quite championship level against the Koreans at least. After all they went through, Falcons would not be denied. They're the defending champs of OWCS for a reason, and AQ found out the hard way what it looks like when they're peaking. At first, Qadsiah tried to throw them off balance with D.Va and even some Pharah, but it didn't work at all, and AQ had to reconvene. So they go back to their tried and true on map 2, and at first, it's really working. They might have a chance this time. Falcons can't keep up in the pure mirror. AQ are better than them at something. They built up a 115 to 21 meter lead, and there's only 150 left in the map. With that kind of advantage, you just play for ult, utilize the high ground, and it should be a done deal. There's no way they lose this, right? Oh yeah. You bet your sweet Bippy they lost this map. Maybe one of the craziest push meltdowns in the history of the esport right before our eyes. A damn near 100 meter lead thrown out the window. And it all stems from how hard they committed on just the first fight when they had so many chances to close it out. They wanted to win in the literal first fight of overtime by committing 3 ults, which was all they had. To me at least, it completely ruined any advantage they might have had, and the overtime snowball began right after. Labda tried his best with a pretty good flank overclock. It almost worked out in the end, but there wasn't enough additional resources, so it didn't matter. It was an absolute fumble of a map. I cannot comprehend how they managed to lose it. And clearly they thought the same, because this match was never close after this. Falcons boomed them mentally and overwhelmed them with elite plays from Proper and Merit. They completely dominated that finals. alexyOWL learned the hard way there's levels to this. There's still more of a gap to close if them or any other Western team wants to match the super elite. Uncompetitive, anticlimactic finish, Falcons win 4-0 and capture their second ever OWCS major. A couple thoughts here before wrapping up. First and foremost, crazy run by alexyOWL. The improvement from stage 1 is very impressive, and they were good at the start of the year. But Stage 2 felt like a completely different animal, like they finally started to see things differently. Coach Jungbuck had those guys playing so well. They lost one singular time from the start of Stage 2 until Riyadh, and that came in that Grand Finals matchup. They showcased elite synergy, while certain aspects of the team began to progress more. Labda, Landon, and Checkmate were all very good, but I'd argue Checkmate's sim got even better, and they deserve a lot of credit. But I think it's clear that the biggest reason this team jumped was because of their young tank player Ziad. He wasn't all that well known at the start of the year, but since then, he's become one of the best tanks in the league. It's incredible how fast he's progressed, and keep in mind, he's only 17 years old on his first real team. He was probably the youngest player in the tournament by far, and he's already this good in such a short amount of time with proper resources. Coach Jungbuck really may have found the next hidden gem of the tank position. It's astounding to see such an inexperienced kid play this good. It was amazing to see how much he could make people fear him on D.Va. He might be the best in the world on her. Ziad's story has been so special, and I'm excited to see what he can do as him and Qadsiah continue to press onwards. This was an excellent stage for AQ and EMEA as a whole, who just look so strong out there. Good for them, man. But in the end, Korea still hoists up the trophy. I'm not sure what to say here. It's so strange, because a couple of months ago, Falcons looked half dead. They were horrible out in Stage 2. They missed the top 3 cut to get to Riyadh. They were completely and utterly lost, bringing in new players that were struggling. They had players taking breaks, genuinely looking like a bad team in some scenarios, and it seemed like something was wrong with them internally. But maybe they needed all that to refocus, to realize it's a new year and they still want to keep going. Because from the moment of the LCQs until the present day, they haven't lost a game. They came close plenty, but they were always one step ahead. They showed a lot of resilience, and they got better in such a short amount of time, which shows how much they still care. They downloaded the Ram meta, and without Hanbin or Stalker as well for the most part, and as usual, these brawly setups seem to favor their roster a lot. But I'd also like to add that someone finally looked more like his old self after quite honestly being really bad in Stage 2. Just him being more in sync with the team made a massive difference. But then Proper came back, and that was the biggest thing. It came at the cost of Stalker, who was also playing really well before, but Falcons definitely responded well to Proper being back in the lineup. From that LCQ against Zeta to present day, Proper has dominated basically every series. Proper must have done some soul searching or something, because he looked more motivated than ever, like a fire was lit under him. He did so much for Falcons, putting that team on his back time after time when things got close for comfort. He took a rest, but it almost made him more powerful, like he needed a recharge or something. He won tournament MVP, and rightfully so. This felt like Prime Proper being the most clutch player in the game, just like the old days. And I think him and Merit made for a very overwhelming combo in semblance to the O2 Blast days when they were together. Honestly, Merit deserves every bit of credit that Proper gets, because I think he stepped up pretty big as well. He was in the kill feed all day long, every day on Sojourn. The last time Merit looked that dominant to me was the Florida Mayhem days. Yet again, when given the chance, he played out of his mind to help win a championship. Proper sometimes needed a moment to warm up or make swaps, while Merit stayed pretty consistent out there. They both deserve immense credit, as well as Falcons as a whole, for coming all the way back when it really felt like they were done for. Falcons did everything right in this tournament. Sometimes it was really close, but being a champion doesn't necessarily mean being dominant every match. Showing you can adapt is just as important, and they did plenty of that. Falcons rediscovered what it takes to have the heart of a champion, and it comes with a sweet $50,000 bonus on top of their finals earnings since they were the LCQ team. This was an absolutely incredible run to wake this team up just in time for a potential repeat at Stockholm. Well done, Falcons. I didn't think you had it in you, but you proved me wrong yet again. And with that, the 2025 Esports World Cup comes to a close. It was full of unexpected moments and so many more close games than anyone could have envisioned. 11 games went the distance in this one tournament. It was very competitive overall, and it showed that yes, the gap is continuously closing between Korea and the others. The Western teams are gaining even more confidence that they might have what it takes someday. I'd like to see more of a sample in a less Western-favored meta, but you can't deny the improvement. We got another huge upset, and some near upsets on top of it. 2 tournaments in a row now where this has been the case. It's a great sign as we head towards the OWCS Championship and beyond in future years. While the meta wasn't anyone's favorite, it's hard to not love how much it emphasized team synergy. And on top of it, we had good games, a good crowd. There's not much to complain about. EWC was fun, and the future certainly looks bright, ladies and gentlemen. Buckle up for the ride, and I'll see you in Stage 3.